So it's 4 o'clock. We're going to start the Board of Health meeting for July 10th. At 4 to 6 p.m. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on March 29th, 2023. This meeting will be conducted via remote means and in person, as long as members of the public can easily access the proceedings in real time and participate remotely. Until further notice, this meeting will no longer be broadcast live, but it may be watched when the show is replayed on YouTube. Members of the public wish to participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner. In person at the Rope Walk Meeting Room located on the second floor of the Town Hall, 26 Court Street, Plymouth, Mass. Note occupancy limit of the room may reduce the number of attendees that can be accommodated. You can also join and participate remotely by using the Zoom link that's present on the agenda. You may also send any comment or questions that pertains to a current agenda item to publichealth@plymouth-ma.gov. They'll be read on the air and answered by the Board of Health as practical. If time doesn't permit answers during the meeting, responses will be sent by email as soon as possible. So I'm not sure, should we proceed with the stable hearing without Karen? As we can skip that and go back to it. Karen, the department head, has like a lot to do, and things happen at the last second.
Oh, she's coming.
On the way. So while we're waiting, I'm going to attempt to show you a little more information. We talked about this last time. Dr. Reed brought it up, but there's a few things to add about heat illness. So I'm just going to, I hope. And screen share it. It is. It is here someplace. Nope. Just the meeting notice. Why don't you go ahead and put that one up for me? Stop this. It's just the first couple slides. And then just hit slideshow and go to. And from beginning. Way over on the left on the top.
Yeah, it's my.
And we got it. So I just wanted to add a couple of things, and one of these, I'm hoping the one after this we can put on the department website. So last time, Dr. Reed gave some information about various kinds of heat-related illnesses. And I don't remember if we actually went through the people who are at high risk for this. Seems appropriate to remind everybody, because anybody that's 65 and older is at high risk. Infants and children at high risk, people with chronic conditions, people without air conditioning, athletes, outdoor workers, and women who are pregnant. So if you can go to the next slide, there's a, what I'm hoping will be something that'll be useful on a department website.
There's two of the same things, I can.
Yeah, it is the same things, but there's some stuff different down at the bottom. So, and this is all in one place, and it's from the CDC, so. You notice down in the bottom, it also talks about sunburn and heat rash. So it's a little more complete. It does give information about what to look for and what to do in each case. So we're not gonna go through these because you went through them last time. But I just thought that it would be worthwhile having something like that that's all compressed into one.
Yeah, I'm
table.
gonna have a whole bunch of my director's report too that will be added to the
Okay.
website.
So if we could just get that on there somehow, I think it's all the information, a lot of it in one centralized table. So it'd probably be useful. And you can stop the screen share. We'll go ahead with this table here. So the first item of business was supposed to be, stable hearing for Sandwich Road, Scotty Browning, that's you? If you would mind coming up to the table, because this is broadcast live and this little owl device is the one that gets the images for the speaker. And the audio for the speaker, so if you could just sort of summarize, what you need the Board of Health to do for you.
Before we start, if I could through the chair, there is one thing. Hi, Scotty, I'm Karen Keen, Director of Public Health for Plymouth. We never got from you, proof that you notified your abutters.
I brought it in today.
Oh, can I see them?
Sorry, a little bit.
We do worry about abutters because we've, in the
Oh,
past, we've
absolutely.
had complaints about spells and things
Yeah,
like that.
sure. And I've also talked to them
Okay,
in person.
Okay, did you bring us a copy of the notice as well?
I forgot to bring them. No, I didn't. I'm sorry, I was thinking of the,
Do you have it on your phone or anything? Because the instructions that you got said that you had to bring, upload or bring us copies of the notice and certified receipts prior to the hearing, so. The notifications, but we also need a copy of the notice.
I do not, it's on my computer.
Okay.
And I think I have copies at home, I did print them out.
So then, the board can either hear Ms. Browning's presentation, you cannot vote on it,
okay.
but may save time next time.
Well, we're going to have an awful packed meeting.
Right, so exactly, so I would recommend going ahead perhaps with her presentation,
Okay,
asking any questions you might have. But then you won't be able to vote until we actually have a copy of the notice.
How long is the meeting? Do you have other stuff if we talk about it? And I can- Would that help?
We're gonna finish about 5:30.
Okay,
So, but we have other things on the agenda, so I don't know if that would work.
okay.
depends on how far it is to go home and get it.
It's about what, 15 minutes to home? Is the traffic still? I could try, and if it doesn't work, do it again next week, or Dad could be run home and grab a cookie.
The other option is we can go ahead with other items and you can go ahead and try to get back with it. And then we can put you in at the end of the other items on the agenda.
Just do it safely. We don't want.
Yeah, don't,
Are we rushing or getting?
Must get to Board of Health.
Yeah.
Let's do that, it'll take half.
Okay,
Okay,
okay, I'm sure we'll still be at this for half an
we'll
hour.
move on.
sorry about that, thank you.
So now I guess we need to go back to the oh, presentation again. Oh, should have been able to. And now if you just go down to the number 4 spot. And then click from current slide. Okay. So, there has been a little while ago on June 17th, some action or a ruling by the US Surgeon General. And the US Surgeon General was concerned about two things. One was social media for young people, which I know has come up a lot. There's a lot of concern about it. And so he came out with and there was an article in the New York Times, as you can see. And the Surgeon General is Dr. Vivek Murthy. And he said in a presentation that social media is a contributing factor in mental health crisis among young people. I was hoping Lauren might be here. Maybe she'll. Because I don't know, this is actually stuff that pertains directly to, things that Dr. Reed might know about also, and perhaps even you, Amy. So if you know of anything, just, speak up. And the Surgeon General now thinks that we should put, or there should be a Surgeon General's warning on the label of social media platforms required by law. And it's supposed to be something like what they currently have on tobacco packs. Obviously, they have to be a little bit different. The warning label requires congressional action. So, although there's a lot of people that are concerned about this, even in the Congress, obviously the social media companies are probably being opposed to it. But it would remind parents and adolescents that social media has not been proven safe. Evidence from tobacco studies show that these warning labels do increase awareness and change behavior. So they're hoping, or he's hoping, that it's going to be the same thing. But he also said that just a warning label wouldn't make social media safe for young people, but would be a part of the steps that might help. So in the next slide. I think you got to highlight it. Usually if you just click, it goes to the next one. If it's on slideshow, it's supposed to be.
Oh, sure, but it's not.
No, it is.
But it's not.
It's not showing on my screen. But it shows up on the big screen. Is that visible to you, Deb?
Yes, it is. Yep.
So the next things that come up with it is that, yes, more everybody knows by now, social media is prevalent among young people. 95% of the youth ages 13 to 17 do use it, and more than a third say that they use it almost constantly. So what does this do to young people? Obviously, for one thing, they spend an awful lot of their time on this. And they're using social media, and some of them are getting into some difficult situations where they're not having enough direct interaction with other people in their age group or even other adults. And some of them actually end up seeing things that actually cause them to be having trouble with insults that are coming across online and social media and various kinds of harassments that can cause endless amounts of trouble. So he thinks that it's time to require the Surgeon General's warning label because of the mental health issues for adolescents. And the use of the warning label, I'm reading this from what I've already got on my screen, but it's not what's up there. So the social media is a product, and the business model depends upon addicting the kids to it, which has probably been, from whatever I've been able to notice, extremely effective. Because I can't think of anybody that's in the teenage year group that don't use social media a lot. I don't know if anybody else does.
I can tell you, my son didn't go on it till he was recent, like that, he's 17, he just started. And I'm like, wow, like I kind of was like, oh, really now? Like, but he held out for as longer than I could have.
So, it's a difficult thing to control.
I think it's difficult for adults, you know, like I know I've had conversations with friends and being like, I wish I just could not be, you know, like you go on and oh my God, 15 minutes just passed by.
Mm.
So I can see how kids would definitely have issues. I think adults have issues too.
And
But,
there, in
yeah.
terms of the people that I've seen that use social media a lot,
Mhm.
sometimes they get one of the friends I have calls computer head.
Mm.
In other words, they're so involved and so absorbed by the social media that they don't even recognize what else is going on. They don't hear other people speaking.
Yeah.
And you have to do something, to get their attention. And that's harmful, obviously. So this goes to the American Academy of Pediatrics. And it's obvious that something has to be done about it. And is Congress going to do it? We don't know. But the United Kingdom and the European Union have passed laws that take into account what kids need and what happens when they're overreacting to these digital products. So it's possible that something might be done, but he's drawing attention to it. The next slide down, I guess. So for those that don't recognize him, that is the current Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. And he was speaking at an event at the White House in April. And he was not only concerned about social media and its effect on young kids, he was concerned about the risks from widespread gun violence. And he announced that he considered it to be a public health emergency.
Mhm.
So the next slide goes into more details about that. So he's the top doctor in the US. And he declared it a public health emergency, and he thinks that it should be treated as such. That, of course, involves departments of public health, it involves boards of health, it involves state departments of public health. And he thinks, and apparently this was prepared as a 40-page publication. If anybody wants more information, you just click on that highlighted 40-page publication link. And it shows you the scope of firearm violence, its impact on victims and communities, and a slew of policy suggestions for lawmakers, community leaders, and health systems, and what to do about it. He said in report that, obviously a public health approach can guide the nation's strategy and actions, as it has done in the past with other things like tobacco-related disease and motor vehicle crashes. It's up to us to do something about it, not us as in the Plymouth Board of Health. Obviously, this is something that is a much more widespread problem that goes way beyond Plymouth. But it's a matter of safety and well-being of our children and future generations. He noted that leading cause of death of US children, and these are mostly adolescents between 5 and 20 since 2020, has actually been firearm-related injuries and deaths, and it actually surpassed car accidents. It's become ever more common. Gun violence is something that we see all the time. It's really disturbing because often it's like, a major, gun problem and it's mass shootings and
Well, yeah, didn't we talk about it with the grandmothers about?
We
how
did. Yeah.
Like when you think of gun violence, you think of, shoot them out, but suicide with guns is a huge issue,
yeah,
huge.
that's on here too. I mean, I personally know at least one person that died of suicide.
Yeah, I do too.
And he was the head of the department I worked on at the Columbia Medical Center.
Yeah,
An MD, PhD.
yeah.
I mean, the guy was incredibly intelligent and gifted. And for a reason which was only speculation, when I came into the laboratory to work one Monday morning, I was met with silence.
Mm,
And I looked around and said, what's going on?
yeah. Yeah, my cousin lost his son to suicide with a gun,
Mm-hmm.
and if it was, and that's immediate, and not that I think suicide at all is something the death rate on suicide with a gun is like 90-something%, right? And then it's like the other methods aren't as successful.
Yeah.
So for me, gun violence, I lean towards suicide because that in our world, maybe our world here in Plymouth, Cause he was a Plymouth resident that died, you know, he was here in town, he was in his 20s.
Yeah, I'm
So-
sure it's happened more than once.
Oh, I'm sure.
And that's usually the method that's picked because usually if they resort to gun violence to commit suicide, it's going to happen.
Yeah, there was a story on NPR once about, it was out in Montana where neighbors help each other by holding their, like, when you go into, if you can recognize the fact that you might fall into like a depressive state, you give your gun to your neighbors. Like, these neighbors have this
Oh.
agreement.
That's
And
interesting.
I know, I was so, and it was in Montana, and
Huh.
I definitely think there's gun culture, like, oh, everybody should have a gun if you want one. But recognizing the fact that suicide was real
Hmm.
and gun violence was immediate, that people would hand their guns over until the depressive state passed.
Yeah,
That's
I
interesting.
know, I was, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are suicide hotlines that people can use.
Mhm.
But when someone reaches the point where they're actually considering that and they
Yeah.
have a gun in the house,
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it's conversation, you know, around like in stigma, like knowing that there's this whole group that recognizes the fact that depression is real and gun violence is real, but gun ownership is legal and acceptable. Then you have the conversations and you hand them over.
and I don't know, are you aware of the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence group? They're- They came in, and I think the last time we talked about, maybe we should have them come back again.
Yeah, I thought they were great.
I thought they were great.
What they do, because they know it's such a controversial, politically charged sort of topic. They try to avoid that, and what they do is to try to preach gun safety. And so they give out gun locks free of charge. And there's other ways to do it too. But if this has become a problem, such the Surgeon General said it's now a public health emergency, maybe we should invite the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence to come back again. The next slide, I think, has a little more information. So, this actually tells you what goes on, so, this was a little dated, but you notice the advisor came out after the second consecutive weekend of mass shootings. And came out before the presidential debate. And after the Supreme Court had already ruled that they will uphold the federal ban on guns for domestic abusers. So that actually surprised a lot of people, I think.
Mhm.
But they came out and said, yes, it is legal to ban gun ownership for people that are involved with domestic abuse. Because it's obviously another big thing. And there's the firearm related suicide, which grew by 20% between 2012 and 2022. Higher incidence, again, increasing among young people between 10 and 34 years old. Black Americans have the highest rates of firearm homicide across ages 27, I guess all ages, but 27 per 100,000 in 2022, and apparently it went up again. And so they have their problems. So do some of the American Indian and Alaska Natives under 45. Next slide. This is the end of that. So there's recommendations, some are strongly worded, but not enforceable easily. Include increasing federal funding for gun violence prevention research. But as you probably all know, the National Rifle Association has long opposed to frame any kind of gun violence as a public health issue. And they've also lobbied effectively to freeze federal funding into gun violence research. So that's a problem. They're very strong in terms of their lobbying activities. And it's a very difficult problem, but everyone needs to know about it, simply because now we've made a little bit of progress, at least for domestic abusers. There's also the red flag notices.
Mhm.
And you may remember that it came up in Maine, but Maine didn't have a red flag notice, they had a yellow flag notice. And there was a world of difference between those two.
Mhm.
And so, as you probably remember, there was an incidence of mass shooting, that went on in Maine. And it came up that, well, somebody should have done something about this before this happened, but they didn't. And then, disaster ensued. There may be another spacer after this one, can have a look, yeah. So that's what I wanted to bring up about, the Surgeon General and his concerns. They also stated that, his job was actually at risk because of the really strong opposition that came out of various gun organizations, including the NRA. So, the next slide down, I think, is something I thought also would be useful, in terms of getting it onto the department website. I think in 1 week, I saw news reports on the local news about instances where someone nearly drowned, and there happened to be a lifeguard nearby who noticed and sprang into action, and actually was able to pull the person out from the bottom of the pool and get cardiopulmonary resuscitation, which saved their lives. But obviously this is a problem, so I put on this, the Drowning Prevention Campaign Toolkit. Again, it's the American Academy of Pediatrics, because this really impacts a lot of the very young children. And as you can see, it happens very quickly. There's usually no noise when it happens, and unless you're paying attention, you might not notice that someone is in deep trouble and ends up in the bottom of the pool. And it does actually cause more deaths among children ages 1 to 4 than anything else. So, I mean, it's obviously a concern.
Yeah.
But this website does have a bunch of, things to do to help prevent it. So,
This is one of those things, and I have another family member who had, a couple of kids, big pool party, and she turned around, 2 minutes, and and the middle ones on the bottom of the pool. And they were able to pull them up, but she's, I feel like that's one of those things where you're like, oh, it'll never happen to me. And she put it on Facebook to be like, it happened to me, it can happen to you, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
You gotta get your kids swimming lessons, and you gotta keep your eye on them when you're in a pool.
yeah, I talked to a neighbor that lives down the street from me, because we were traveling off to actually a Cape Cod baseball league game.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're talking about various things, and of course, if anything comes up that involves public health or safety, I'm usually the one that's gonna bring it up. And I brought it up, and the guy sitting next to me said, oh, yeah, he said, well, what happens when I'm around family members and there's young kids and there's a swimming pool is I go and sit at the edge of the pool. I don't take my phone. I don't take food. I don't take beverages. And I sit there and I do nothing but watch the kids.
Yeah.
And then eventually, if I need some break because I've got a bathroom break or I've got to get something to drink, I just yell for somebody to come over and relieve me. And I caution them when they do that don't take your eyes off of the pool, especially the kids, especially if there is no lifeguard. Because if you do, even for a minute, something awful is going to happen.
It could.
And so how do you prevent it according to the American Academy of Pediatrics? Swim lessons, not only for toddlers, but also for parents. So, parents need to be able to jump in and save somebody who's in trouble in a pool. If they're the ones that are present, there may be no lifeguard. There may be no one who's been trained to do it. So swim lessons are vital. It's vital that toddlers, also have some kind of swim safety protection and instruction. And I think what happens with toddlers is they just give them drown-proofing instruction. So I think they teach them to actually float on their backs. And if they're up, face down, it teaches them how to flip themselves back over. They may not be able to swim, but they may be able to do something that would help to prevent them from actually starting to ingest water and drown. In a boat, all adults and all children should wear life jackets at all times. Does that happen? Anybody go out on boat rides?
Yeah.
With small groups of people?
Yeah.
Do they all wear life jackets?
No.
stuff. I mean, even in canoes and kayaks and things like that, because, you can end up in the water. And it's amazing the number of people that do water activities and can't swim. They don't have even the vaguest ability to swim. And if they end up in the water, they generally are in trouble unless there's someone there to help them. So it's also encouraged that teens should all learn CPR, especially if they're younger members of the family. The next slide has two more on it, I think. So help your team get water smart, learn to swim from a qualified instructor, choose safe places to swim. It's amazing the number of people that get into trouble because they go swimming in a place which is really not safe, where the water is very deep or it drops off very quickly. Learn to recognize hidden obstacles and rip currents. I ran into that once when I was on a vacation in the Caribbean. And I knew there was another beach a little bit up from where we were actually hanging out. So, well, I think I'll get a pair of swim goggles and I'll go check it out. So I did. And then I turned around to come back and there was a rip current going the other way because the tides were changing. And so now it was not impossible for me because I'm a pretty experienced swimmer. And there was two other guys along with me that went up and did the same thing. But we had to swim like crazy and take breaks because it was exhausting trying to swim against the current. Somebody else, that didn't have as much training or experience probably would have had a lot of trouble. So learn to recognize hidden obstacles. People jump into water, go diving, and sometimes they end up not checking first and they end up diving into a shallow area, or they end up hitting rocks. Never go into the water after you've been drinking alcohol. That's probably something that most people don't worry about much, but they probably should. And the key thing, never swim alone. So I learned that when I was learning to scuba dive. The biggest rule for scuba diving is you never go diving without a dive buddy. And I learned that because I was an underwater photographer and I had an assigned dive buddy in a Caribbean island. And I took a picture and I turned around and my dive buddy had disappeared.
Oh, wow.
And I looked around and went back to the surface to see if he went up to the surface and he wasn't there. I said, well, I'm alone. I can't do this any longer because it's not safe. So I went back to the beach and the dive master came out and said, how come you came back so fast? And by the way, where's your dive buddy? I said, beats me. I turned around and he vanished. And he said, he did what? And he'd gone. I couldn't find him. I didn't know where he went and I didn't think it was safe to stay there by myself. He said, you did the right thing, but he's going to find out when he comes back, if he comes back, that he did the wrong thing. So I waited about 20 minutes, no sign of him. Finally, here he comes, wading back in, carrying his fins. Dive master says, is that him? I said, yeah. Dive master went running out into the water, grabbed him by his buoyancy vest, picked him up and slammed him face first down into the sand and put his knee on him and said, you will never do that again and you can never go diving with this dive company again for the rest of your life.
Wow.
So, I mean, they took it really seriously. Other thing we already talked about, a water watcher. Adult, preferably somebody who can swim. Preferably someone who's had some rescue training or at least knows CPR. And if you're one of those, put down your cell phone, better still, keep it back in the chairs away from where you're sitting. Avoid all other activities. Supervise, even if there are lifeguards, because sometimes lifeguards don't see it. And switch off with another adult who breaks. I think that's all, critical information, and I personally think, although it's up to Karen and the department, whether or not that stuff deserves also to be.
No, I think it's great. And something else that I've been reading lately too is that they're advising people to avoid wearing light blue, gray, or green bathing suits.
Oh, I think I just saw that, but
Yeah.
that one's crazy.
Yeah, and they actually showed all different color bathing suits in water.
maybe, because I'm like, I saw that.
Yeah, I know. Well, like, it was such an interesting article too, and I was like, that's amazing. So, I mean, you can Google it and it's like a whole bunch of different things come
Yeah.
up, but it does show you. Like, there's little like tests where they
Yeah.
actually test the bathing suits and a color, and they go down the same depth. And it really is crazy how you do lose sight of those colors.
Yeah,
Because the sun is reflecting in the water and then you think it's just like a shadow or something, but
yeah,
food for thought, especially for little kids.
yeah.
I mean, the other thing that comes up all the time, at least in beaches, is shark attacks.
Mm.
And generally speaking, Texas and Florida have the biggest, shark attack rate.
Yeah,
But there are things that you should not do that are gonna attract sharks. And
Like swim near seals.
yeah, you don't wanna go swimming. If you see lots of seals on the beach
Mhm.
and you see some other seals sticking their little heads up and they look like dogs looking around in the water, you don't wanna go in the water. Because especially great white sharks, that's their primary food source. And if there's a lot of seals, there's going to be sharks. Absolutely true. And that's happened a lot out of Cape Cod. Nowadays, they have shark spotters and they've got devices they attach to the sharks, but not all of them, so they can keep track of where they. But you think you're safe if you're in knee-deep or waist-deep water and you don't go any deeper. But recently, that's not been enough. Because I forget where it was, I think it was either Florida or I think it was Texas. Two people got bitten, they weren't actually killed, but they got severely injured and they were bleeding heavily. And then you see like this little dorsal fin sticking up in the water, maybe at most 6, 7 feet from the shore, swimming casually along. And of course, when that happens, lifeguards go immediately into action and they blow whistles and, everybody get out of the water. And then sometimes they actually send planes over or helicopters to see if they can spot the sharks near the beaches. And if they do, swimming is banned. But that's all important stuff. I've seen plenty of sharks in my scuba diving days. But I was trained, what do you do if there are sharks around? Well, you watch them carefully. If you're down near the bottom, swimming along with scuba gear, you have to really worry about them because they're not going to attack you. But they will attack more likely something they see on the surface that looks like a seal from underneath. What do you think that would be?
You mean like that human?
Something that's not a human, but has the same kind of overall shape. A surfboard,
Oh,
something like a surfboard, or someone that's scuba diving that's wearing a dark wetsuit.
mhm.
And so, that kind of thing is more risky. And that's why when you're scuba diving, when you decide it's time to go back to the boat, you don't mess around. You have to not go too fast because otherwise you get embolisms. But you want to keep looking around you and see what's around you. And even when you're in the water, just swimming at a beach, it's a wise idea to constantly check around you in all directions to see what you see. Because, you could end up being someplace where there are sharks in the area. Usually they don't attack. If they do attack, if they bite a person, they realize pretty fast that it doesn't taste like a seal. And so although they've caused some injury, they usually just let you go. But not in time not in time to not have a problem with bleeding out unless somebody can stop it. So it's a little risky, but I always say, sharks are not really after humans. They are not. Usually the other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to be swimming in an area where somebody is spearfishing. Because there's a lot of blood in the water. And that usually, it's amazing. Sharks have this unique sense of smell. And they can detect blood. Oh, you made it back. Good. They made it back
That's perfect.
they can respond very quickly from like miles to find the source of blood in the water. So we can go ahead and we can stop the screen sharing. So you now have delivered the, should we just read it so that everyone knows? Because we don't have copies of it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so, okay, so one is, hi Holly, I am sending you this, so I'm just gonna make sure that we double check that we're getting the. Yeah. Make sure. All right, so it looks like you don't have the addresses on the certified mail things. Okay. I'm sending this notice to inform you that I'm applying for a stable permit for 3 horses at 131 Sandwich Road. The public hearing will be on July 10th at 4 PM in the Rope Walk Meeting Room at the Town Hall, which is all correct.
Okay.
Perfect. That's
And
one.
there was
Is that
one
it?
other, right?
Yeah. Again, I am sending you this notice to inform you that I am applying for a stable permit for 3 horses on 131 Sandwich Road. The public hearing will be July 10th at 4 PM in the Rope Walk Meeting Room at the Town Hall. So that's
Okay.
perfect.
Thank you.
So we can now proceed.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, you would like to add 2 horses? You already have 1 present, correct?
I actually did end up buying 2.
Oh, okay, so you have them.
Oh, yes, I have a stable permit for 1, because I was kind of in a purchase. I just wanted to make sure I had room. I currently have 2, but they're on a different property right now. I'm boarding them, over at Little Forge. We can do some fence training and stuff like that. And they're there for the summer.
And so your stable facility, does it have capacity for 3?
Does it have that?
Does it currently have capacity for 3 horses?
Yes.
It does.
Mhm.
Okay, and I noticed also that you also stated you had control in terms of disposing of manure.
Yes, I have had sheep on the property in the past, and, we had a good compost system going. And have a little orchard on the property, which makes good use of the compost, and I'm also familiar with driving pastures and stuff like that, so a combination of those 2 should work.
Okay, and there was something about the where you're currently keeping the sheep was going to be converted to stable space?
There is a barn on the property.
Mhm.
I don't have any sheep right now, it's where I had the sheep in the past. And it will also be suitable for horses as a run-in.
And what about, fly control? Is that a problem?
The compost pile hasn't been a problem in the past. It's worked really well. I may have to add some, mulch hay to it, just to keep the nitrogen down. Otherwise, the horses, my intent is to have them largely on pasture,
Mhm.
in which case flies, as far as tracking flies to the property, it shouldn't be a big deal, so I'm gonna keep it dragged, and fly control on the horses themselves. I use a combination of fly spray and a spot on product, to keep the horses, keep the flies off the horses.
What about the horse urine control?
Hmm?
What about urine from the horses?
Again, if they're spread out pretty well on pasture, it gets spread out and filtered, the nitrogen gets filtered through the soil. The soil there, the soil structure is plenty sandy, and it's relatively flat, so it does run, through the soil. And again, if it's on pasture, so the whole pasture is growing, then most of the grass will absorb a lot of that nitrogen, before it gets into the water.
Okay, and Karen, there is a restriction in terms of the size of the property for the number of horses that are allowed. Is that a problem here?
No,
Okay. Well, that's all the questions I have.
I think there was something that about vaccinations, but when you did buy the horses, so I'm assuming the new horses. Yeah.
Yes, one of them needs spring shots, but.
What about Eastern equine encephalitis?
Yes,
There's a vaccine for that for horses, right?
there is, and
But not for
that,
people.
that is the one of the horses is not up to date on that, and I do have an appointment, to get her vaccinated.
Okay, because that has popped up.
Yeah.
At least in mosquitoes, and actually we're in a moderate risk area here in Plymouth,
If
because
you,
they found them in, I think, in
Carver.
Carver. Right.
oh, really?
oh, Kingston too.
Oh,
More?
Where to did you say?
Kingston today.
Um,
Mhm.
I have an appointment in August to get her vaccinated. If it is a problem, I can certainly, I think that's an over the counter one, so I could give it to her myself. But the vet said if I wanted to be one of her clients, then she needed to do the vaccines. Just so she has her bread and butter.
But is that a problem? Should we try to get that speeded up?
No.
That's okay,
That's okay.
okay. I noticed there's somebody actually joining us. That's it, Karen?
She's here for this now.
Are you here for the, yes. Hey Karen, are you here for the stable variance request?
No, something else.
Okay. Wasn't sure. So anybody else on the board have questions? No. Deb, do you have any questions?
I do not. It sounds like she knows what she's doing with her horses, though.
Meg, do you have any questions?
I do not.
And I already shot all my questions, so I have no further questions either. Is there a recommendation on the part of the department?
Yeah, I mean, the department would definitely recommend, especially with the effort of going back home to get the appropriate paperwork, and the abutters were notified, and the one thing I do like is the properties on town water.
Mhm.
I do get a little apprehensive when it's on a well, but
Sure.
all the abutters are also on town
Yeah,
water.
the butters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do like to see that, so the department would recommend.
Okay. If there's any further questions, I just ask one of the board members to make a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
That was Deb. Deb is voting today because Lorenzo is with us. He sent an email in that he would not be able to attend today. So if there's any further discussion, please go ahead. No, okay. If there's no further discussion, I'll just call the roll. Meg, yes or no?
Yes.
Deb, yes or no?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Dr. Reed?
Yes.
So yes, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good luck.
Please protect your horses from triple E.
Oh, I know.
Because that also feeds down to protecting all of us too.
Yes.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you. Appreciate it.
Sorry, we had to make you run all the way back home to get that.
Oh, I'm sorry I didn't bring it today. It was printed out on my computer, ready to drop it off.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. So Karen, on the screen, are you here for one of the agenda items or is that for public comment that you?
I had sent a letter, so I'm not sure if the subject matter got on the agenda. It was in regard to the health human beings of forests.
I don't believe that was on the agenda.
Yeah, we just got that.
Oh, it just came in.
It wasn't even time to do it.
Just so you know, for future reference, what happens is that according to open meeting law, which we strictly abide by.
Yeah.
We have to publish the final agenda at least 48 hours before the meeting, and it does not include weekends and holidays. So obviously, in this case, if your request came in and it was sometime on Monday or Tuesday, and it came in after we were able to, Monday. So it was probably after we'd already submitted the agenda to the town for publication, and so it didn't make it onto the agenda. So we will
Okay.
try to get that onto the agenda for our next scheduled meeting. But I can't promise it because we are going to be spending a lot of time, I'm sure, at our next meeting, talking about rodent control and rodenticides, which there's a huge crowd of people that want to speak at. But please look at the agenda before you zoom in. Unless you want to, you're welcome to zoom in and participate on anything that we're doing. But if it's specifically for that purpose that you sent your request in for, please make sure that it's on the agenda before you zoom in.
Okay, and may I ask you a question, Karen? Did you see that I sent a message or something? I saw you shake your head at one point.
No, you sent it to public health and we received it on Monday. It's about the
Okay.
wooded area benefits to human health, correct?
That's right, that's right. Okay. I'll wait till
Okay.
it gets on the agenda. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks,
Yeah.
Karen.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, we're actually doing pretty well, I think, in terms of our timing. We're a little bit behind. If you could go back to the screen share, I'm gonna sort of expedite what we're gonna do, in terms of the whole tech whistleblower letter. So that's a little bit further down. It's probably the one under that. Yeah, it's probably the one under this. Okay, so what happened, and it drew a lot of attention, is that there have been at least one previous and maybe two previous letters that came in from a whistleblower concerning the Holtec work that's going on at the Plymouth nuclear plant down near White House Beach. And another one showed up. Whistleblower letters are usually, as a matter of fact, always are anonymous. Probably to protect them from, some kind of difficulty with the company. And these usually come from people that work for the company. So this person sent this letter to the Mass Department of Public Health Radiation Control Program, which is run by Mr. I don't think it's John Priest, I believe it's Jack Priest, who is the program director for that at the state level. And it also went to the Massachusetts Cape Downwinders Organization, which is based out in South Harwich, that have been very, very active in anything involving what Holtec has been doing at the Pilgrim nuclear plant. So the next slide actually has the actual text of the letters, and it goes on for 2 slides. I'm going to skip through those because it's too hard to read, but it's available for anybody that wants to see it. And this is sort of summarized in what you see here. So the reason this person was very concerned is that he stated that plant personnel working on the refuel floor who were exposed to the airborne contamination resulting from forced evaporation of water. And just to remind everybody why this is forced evaporation, is that there's a body of water inside the building. And they, Holtec decided to put submersible heaters into it. And they turned them on, and instead of maintaining the temperature at ambient temperature, the water gets heated up to about 90 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. This, of course, speeds up the evaporation process. And there's concern about that, and there was questions asked about why you're doing this. And there was 2 reasons. One, they stated, was that it was needed to be done during the winter to supply warmth for the people working in the building. Okay. And there was another reason. They claimed that some of the radioactive metal components that they had to get rid of were actually being contained in boxes submerged in the water. So that the radioactivity could decay so that they could more safely get rid of it. So that was the reasoning, but it caused a lot of controversy because as you evaporate water, which contains radioactive nuclides in it, you also, along with it, evaporate everything that's volatile. And some of the radioactive material that is present in the water is in fact volatile, especially tritium, which is almost like. And so all the water that's being evaporated does contain the same amount of tritium that's present in the water before it's evaporated. The workers, generally speaking, from pictures I've seen, work right next to the big pool of water without any kind of respiratory protection. And so this is a concern. And then notice that it says the workers repeatedly asked Holtec and their radiation protection manager how much internal radiation exposure they were receiving. Turns out that they can't measure internal radiation exposure. They can measure external exposure. And so no one really knew how much radiation they had actually taken in, partly by breathing the evaporated water that's present inside the building. So the technicians that were assigned to do these kinds of safety protocols on the refuel floor stated that the radiation protection technical staff that are responsible for safety planning work and determining radiation exposure to Holtec workers had their positions eliminated due to cost-cutting efforts by Holtec. The technicians also stated that no one in the department, the radiation protection department, knows how to determine airborne radioactivity levels, let alone internalized radiation. And the resulting exposure to workers, nor do they have the experience necessary to devise work plans to mitigate the radiation exposures received by the workers while they're present. The technicians stated that they do not even possess the detection and measurement equipment necessary to determine the airborne radioactivity levels that are present on the refuel floor. Work controls intended to minimize worker radiation exposure were revised by the Holtec radiation protection supervisor. An investigation of the cause of the exposure to the incidents was conducted by the Holtec radiation protection supervisor, who apparently is the only one left in charge of radiation protection for the workers. And the radiation supervisor was the person who relayed the work controls specified in the original draft of the work plan. The contractor eventually that was exposed to the radiation actually set off detectors as he was leaving the radiation pool, and he resigned under duress. So that's the body of what was complained about. I did inquire as to whether or not this constituted a violation of protection procedures that could be in place for workers. So there is a federal agency that's actually responsible for protecting workers from dangers in their workplaces. And the last I knew, someone in MAHB was inquiring to find out if this was a fact in violation. So what's happened about this? If you go to the next slide down, this actually made it into the Plymouth Independent online newspaper. And so you could see that Holtec disputed the claim that the worker was exposed to excess radiation at the site. Even though apparently he set off the radiation detectors and was breathing in radioactive mist from the evaporation. And then on the next slide, you'll see
Excuse
that,
me, Barry, I'm not seeing the slides change. I don't know, it's just,
we see it on the screen here in.
yeah,
in the-
okay. Just if anybody's
Mhm.
viewing from home or what, that they're not gonna see.
Okay, well, I'm basically reading what's on it, but.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make sure you know.
Well, you can see on yours that it's not changing.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, okay.
But that, I'm assuming that if it's on the screen up there, it should be changing.
Because you're.
Dana, do you see that or do you see something different?
I see that and then.
But Barry, what you're seeing is what Deb's seeing, right? Like, that's what's online.
Yeah, I'm not screen sharing though. It's coming.
No, but I'm just saying that you're seeing what Deb's seeing.
Yeah, she's seeing the same thing.
Yeah, so.
It's stuck on 13, the very first slide you came back on.
Yeah.
So it's not,
Okay.
yeah, but like you said, you're saying it, so.
Maybe if you went down and clicked on the other slides, Dana. Because it still has the top one highlighted.
I don't know what are you talking about?
So it would be like slide number 16. Can you move it? Because it won't move on my screen.
How about if I try something else?
I don't think it's in presentation mode. I think that's probably the problem, but
Let me give it a try and see if I can.
So I think, Dana, I think right now you're just looking at the PowerPoint, but you're not on.
I'm gonna do it, I was share screen, I'm just gonna do it without the, without doing
Yeah, I think you're smart.
that.
Okay,
instead.
now can you see it, Deb?
I see slide 17 with the picture of the power plant. Yes.
Yeah, that's what we were just talking about.
Okay.
So the one before that was the one I was previously talking about, which was a summary of the things that was in the whistleblower letter. We're not gonna go back to it, but if you can now move down to the next slide. Is that visible to you, Deb?
Perfect. Yep, I can see it.
Okay. Okay, so we seem to be wrestling with this a lot. So then they consulted the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, who said it has no evidence working that the shuttered Pilgrim nuclear power plant, which is in the process of being decommissioned, were overexposed, keyword overexposed to radiation, despite the whistleblower's claim made in the recent anonymous letter to state officials. And in an email that the NRC sent to the Plymouth Independent, the spokesperson, Neil Sheehan, said the agency is aware of the letter, which asserts that a worker was exposed to unusually high levels of radiation. Letter was postmarked May 14th, sent to John Priest, and also to the Cape Downwinders, which is the Citizens Watchdog Group. And the State Department of Public Health forwarded the letter to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And then the statement was made by Diane Turco. It appears the conscientious Holtec worker is reaching out for help. These allegations must be taken seriously. Health and safety impacts to both worker and public. Holtec and the NRC cannot be trusted. We need an independent investigation now. Holtec is the company charged with securing the site of the former nuclear plant in Manomet, including the long-term storage of radioactive fuel. So what do they mean by that? What they mean by that is most of you have probably seen pictures previously of the dry casks that are stored on site. And each one of those dry casks contain used fuel rods. There are 62 of them. They are very close to Rocky Hill Road. You can actually see them as you're driving along Rocky Hill Road. And they are dangerous. What is in those those dry casks, if it were released to the atmosphere, would probably require an evacuation at the time. So they have to be maintained in a safe way. And I will be asking questions about that at the next NDCAP meeting, because I have been researching it. And I know now a lot more than I used to know about the dry casks and what happens to them, especially in marine environments. And I'm concerned. So I will be allowed 3 minutes to speak, no more, at the NDCAP meeting, and I will ask a lot of questions to see if I can get more information. Next slide, if there is one. I don't know if there is. There may not be any more after that. Yeah, there is. So the workers do wear something called dosimeters. And it measures the amount of radiation they're exposed to, but dosimeters don't measure tritium. And they're only able to measure what is external. So it's not anything that they can't measure what's internal. So the NRC, which keeps saying that, oh, they haven't been exposed to radiation above the limits. What they mean is that they haven't been exposed to more than 5 rems per year, but that does not include whatever has become internalized inside the workers' bodies. The reason that that's a problem for health and public health is that when tritium or any isotope gets internalized, it causes mutations, and Dr. Reed can vouch for this. Some of the mutations actually affect the way in which cells divide, and a number of the mutations, if they accumulate in one cell, is going to cause it to become malignant. And then cancers develop. And so any increase in the amount of radiation that gets internalized is extremely dangerous. I found that out when I was working in a laboratory with tritium and with carbon-14 and with radioactive iodine. So I did it for many years. The tritium and the carbon-14 don't penetrate, they give off radiation, but it doesn't penetrate your skin. So it's not hazardous if you're just being exposed to it. But if it gets internalized, it's really close inside your body to cells with their DNA, and it does cause mutations, and it can result in cancer. So our radiation safety office, of which I have a lot of experience, in medical schools, strictly prohibited anyone from eating, drinking, chewing gum, or storing any food or beverage, any place where any kind of radioactive material was in use, because they didn't want it becoming internalized. And if they found anybody doing it against the regulations, you were immediately precluded from working with the radioactive isotopes, and if it was a really bad case, your entire laboratory no longer could work with radioactive isotopes, which meant that they basically can no longer fulfill the obligations of their research grants.
Oops.
So it's a pretty serious matter. You see up in the top of that, it also says that the plant, the worker that was exposed was setting up radiation detection monitors, and that he can no longer work at the plant. Most workers receive a small fraction of what is conservatively set in terms of the limit. The worker didn't reach that maximum external exposure, which is allowed, but apparently there must have been something internalized because he set off monitors. Patrick O'Brien, who works for Holtec, said a worker inadvertently bumped into the reactor vessel, which sent radioactive particles into the air. Although the employee set off a photo monitor when leaving the area, the dose did not approach the allowed external exposure limits established to protect workers. Planned investigation into the cause of the event is ongoing, including analysis independent of the supervisor involved in the activity. As with any activity at the facility that doesn't go as planned, corrective actions are expected to address both any identified worker performances and any program-related deficiencies. So I wanted to make sure this was in because that's the response of Holtec and of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The last slide shows a little more. Sheehan is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission spokesman, said when the concern involves the safety of people working in a nuclear plant is brought to the attention of the NRC and undergoes careful reviews. Nonsoletta said that the high levels of radiation, because the supervisor had relaxed controls intended to minimize exposure, although it didn't explain how it would have happened. But that is because, according to Holtec, he bumped into some kind of part of the material that emitted radiation. Part of regular inspections that are done reviews a plant's radiological safety, including any impact on workers. If the NIC identifies a concern, it follows up with the Holtec. If the violation is found to be more than minor, the NIC issues a public inspection report. Otherwise, it does not make its findings public, detailing them only to the person or people that raised the concern. In this case, since the letter was anonymous, there would be no way to contact the writer. And this was all put into the Plymouth Independent by Fred Tice. I think that's how you pronounce it. Who's one of the people that works for Plymouth Independent. So I'm sure this will come up. The other thing that always comes up at the NDCAP meetings is what is going on in terms of where water vapor is going besides into the plant environment. And it goes out of stack. And that means it's being emitted out to the atmosphere. It's not a problem for human health so much unless, again, it gets internalized. And the prevailing winds where the plant is located apparently is usually blowing offshore. So it's blowing away out into Cape Cod Bay. But as most of us realize, late in the afternoon, the wind direction shifts. And then you get what's known as a sea breeze. And in these kind of conditions, we welcome sea breezes because it's really hot and it's relief. But it puts people at risk. It puts people at risk who live in Plymouth, Kingston, Marshfield, and Duxbury.
Karen had a question in the
Okay.
chat. If a drinking cup is taken home from a worker, being at Holtec, does it travel home? Meaning, I think could radiation go into a personal item and then be carried home with that person? Karen would like
If
to
there
know.
was residual liquid in the cup, then yes, it could. Be a very tiny amount, obviously. But it could. So the best solution to that is if it was exposed to the water vapor in the plant, it should be disposed of, not reused. So, thank you for the question, Karen. There's a lot of people that are concerned about this because, especially people that lived in White Horse Beach are very close to this plant. Some of the people sitting in the room are. I myself live 2.5 miles away. When I lived in New Jersey for longer than I care to admit because of work-related things. I was within about 10 miles of the nuclear power plant on the Hudson River. And the exclusion zone, because of what was going on there, is 20 miles. And so if anything really serious happened at that Indian Point nuclear reactor, potentially anybody living within 20 miles would have to be evacuated. So it's a serious problem. Unfortunately, because of those dry casks, there's no place to put them. There's no disposal facility for them. And so they have to remain on site. And probably for as long as any of us would be alive. So they're gonna be there. There's no doubt about it. So any questions on the part of any of I know Lorenzo actually was really upset about all this and wanted to talk about it, but he's not here. Anyone have questions about this? Deb, any questions?
Are they being stored above ground, the casks?
Yes. There was recommendations made that not only are they stored above ground, they are not enclosed in an above ground building either. And since they are exposed individually to being seen from Rocky Hill Road, that raises concerns about someone that might want to cause a disaster. That had something that could actually pierce or cause structural damage to those casks. The problem with them is even if a small opening appears over years and they get water, which is not containing boron, which they use routinely to stop the nuclear reaction from the fission reaction from going on. If there's water which is not containing boron, they could start fission reactions again. That would create a huge amount of heat and potentially could cause an explosion. So that's what we know about that. Anybody else have any questions? I've been spending a lot of time going into a lot of information about this, so I have a lot of information. Karen, do you have another question?
I do quickly. And regarding that cup from the worker that brings it out of the plant and back home, and the water is affected. What if the mom is pregnant and she drinks the water from that cup? Is it possible that that would affect the baby, unborn baby?
Yeah. The short answer is yes.
Thank you so much. That's all I need to know. Thank
you. Okay. I mean, no one, usually if you're dealing with pregnant women, it is probably not a good idea for them to be ingesting any kind of radioactive material. Problem is that, when you're pregnant, the cells that make up the fetus and eventually the baby are dividing very, very rapidly. And most things that cause mutations act as the cells replicate their DNA. And so it makes them much, much, much more sort of at risk to anything which causes mutations, including radiation. And so, yes, there is a problem.
Thank you, because there's a child in our town that I think that's what happened to, but who knows? I just wanted to know that it's possible. Thank you so much.
Anything else, Dr. Reed? Do you want to add anything to it? There'll be more because I'm definitely causing some information to be shared that probably Holtec didn't want to share at those meetings. And sometimes it's reluctant. One of the first things I did when I went to the NDCAP meeting was I started inquiring about tritium. And I said, is it true that you cannot remove tritium no matter with any known technology from water? And the whole tech official said, yes, that's true. And I said, so what's coming out of the stack and what's being evaporated into the air? And what would happen if you put that water even into Cape Cod Bay? Even if you removed everything else to 95% removal, there would still be the same amount of tritium that was originally. And he said, yes, that's true. So anyway, that's what's going on with Holtec at the moment. And at the moment, I think what we have to do now is actually go through our director's report.
Okay, so, the state has asked us to remind everyone about ticks and mosquitoes. So, we've seen this before, but, it's important that, we discuss it again. But for personal protection against ticks, always look after coming inside, both yourself and your children, inside and behind the ears, along your hairline, back of your neck, armpits, groin, legs, behind your knees and between your toes. Ticks are tiny, so look for anything that looks like a new freckle. Talk to your doctor if you develop a rash where you were bitten or experience symptoms such as fever, headache, fatigue, sore or aching muscles.
Could we add, Karen, also some of the procedures people would try to do to get rid of a tick that are probably dangerous is to put Vaseline on them.
Yeah.
Some people try that because they figure it'll smother it and then it'll let go. Some people try to just light a match and then put it out and touch the hot match to the surface of the tick. Problem is that when you do that, it's probably going to cause what's in the tick to actually be forced out into the skin.
Right, in this report, it does say you should not apply kerosene, petroleum jelly, nail polish, or a hot match to remove the tick. These measures are not effective and may result in injury.
Karen, what about peppermint oil?
This doesn't say anything about
Well, they
peppermint oil.
They say that makes them back out if you like put peppermint oil around them. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's,
this just actually says that they just recommend that you use a pair of fine point tweezers to grip the tick as close to the skin as possible and pull straight out with steady pressure. So that's what they're talking.
Even wider tweezers, if you crush the body of the tick, trying to remove it, it's going to force some of the material that's inside the tick into your skin.
You gotta get down to by the head,
Yeah.
tick pickers.
Also, we're going to be talking about, mosquitoes and mosquito risk. And it has been reported that we have now had 6 EEE positive mosquito samples in Plymouth County. That's actually more than that now because Kingston has been added to that. Risk levels in the region of Plymouth County have been elevated to moderate. The Massachusetts Department of Public Health also reports 2 West Nile virus mosquito samples were found in Norfolk County. Personal protection measures are recommended due to early season detections and above average mosquito vector populations across the state. And you can check your risk level if you live someplace else besides Plymouth or you're interested in other places. There's an interactive site and the website's right there
Do you know, Karen, at what point they would raise it to severe risk
if we had one.
if we had a human case?
If we actually in Plymouth we have not in Plymouth, the town of, had a positive mosquito sample. They've been in Kingston and Carver. So because those towns are bordering us, our level has been elevated to moderate.
Okay, but they are at severe risk.
Yes, because they have them actually in there. So we're moderate because we neighbor a town that has had one that has tested positive. So intense regional precipitation events, meaning rain, in warm weather will support increased populations of both West Nile virus and EEE mosquito vectors. Avoid mosquito bites by using EPA-approved repellents, appropriate clothing, and avoiding peak mosquito activity between dusk and dawn. And of course, remove any standing water by emptying containers and tarps. And I always remind people too about wheelbarrows and little kiddie pools this time of year.
And even bird baths.
Yep, very true. And then there is a chart that I've included that shows, the number of mosquito samples is 1,720. The number of West Nile virus positive samples is 2, number of triple E is 6. And no human cases reported yet.
I think the West Nile was up in Quincy, right?
Norfolk County.
Norfolk County,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was Quincy.
Yeah. So then, Dr. Poffin talked about heat concerns and, Massachusetts Department of Public Health Bureau of Climate and Environmental Health has come out with some really great information, on many topics relating to heat and, places that you can access additional information. One is, extreme heat and climate resources, where we talk about air quality, heat safety tips, cooling center guidance, climate hazards, how the climate change can harm your health. And an interactive beach water quality dashboard. That's also probably a good thing to remind folks too, while we're talking about beach quality, that all of our bathing beaches here in Plymouth are indeed tested every week. So far, so good. But if there ever was a time where that test would come back, not appropriate for bathing, we would post signs to let the public know, and it would also obviously be posted on our website as well, to let folks know that either a total beach or an area of a certain beach would be closed to public swimming due to the test results, and they are tested, like I said, every week.
Do they get tested more often if there's an extreme precipitation event?
Not yet.
Because sometimes the extra rain
Mm-hmm.
causes problems in some beaches.
Yep, it does. And a lot of use can also do that, and we've had very, very hot weather. So we are keeping a close eye on seeing if any of our numbers start to move, but like I said, so far, so good. All the testing has come back fine. Additional, warm weather resources are water safety, which Dr. Poppin talked about. There is a, website, called DCR Learn to Swim on mass.gov. It's a place where you can find free swimming lessons in Massachusetts for children aged 4 to 12. So that might be an interesting thing. Again, more information on mosquitoes and ticks, and more information about triple E and West Nile virus. So these are all, just resources. Then there's some, information for infants, children, and caregivers, for pregnant people, older adults, individuals with chronic conditions, asthma, cardiovascular disease, and for outdoor workers. Because as hot as it is, there are still people that have to work outside. So, guidance for clinicians, and also what to look for heat stress, which we've also talked about, and also for athletes. This heat in athletes in extreme heat, and steps to take to protect your health during extreme heat, and how to keep youth sport athletes safe. Because even on this hot, humid weather, kids don't want to miss their practices. They want to go, and be with their team. So it's important that we have information, accessible, to keep our young sport athletes safe as well. And finally, in the public health office update, Margaret Coe, who's our health agent, attended a mental health first aid training, which was very, interesting. And we're gonna have another one, another 2-day event where we'll, invite more people to attend. But it's very interesting to be prepared to, deal with, really mental health crisis that we have currently. And that concludes my report for today.
Does anyone have questions for Karen?
No, thank you.
Do we have cooling center here?
We usually, yes, there's a criteria that we have to follow before we declare an official cooling center. But the public's always welcome here at the town hall and the library, and both libraries, Manamet and the main branch on South Street, and also the Center for Active Living.
And that would be publicized if a heat emergency was declared.
Correct.
That would be in the message, I assume.
Correct. Yeah.
Anything else? Okay. Deb? Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, I'll make a couple of quick announcements. One is that, tomorrow, actually, there is an MHOA webinar.
Yeah.
About generational tobacco
Yeah, nicotine-free generation.
generation. Which we briefly discussed and decided it was premature to try to take any action, but it's getting more attention. Because it's considered to be an effective prevention strategy.
Yeah, I'm curious to see tomorrow's webinar, and I think a lot of it is because I hear it is like, sometimes when you have public health webinars, it's all about like the public health, but I've heard this one is much more balanced with, you know, rights versus public health. You know, so it's not just like everybody get rid of cigarettes all the time, but what are the legal abilities to move forward and so that's what I hear. I haven't seen it because it's not there, but
I think it starts at
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
And I believe it's restricted to MHOA members,
There's a cost if you're not married to.
but you know, we have several MHOA members. Other things to mention is that our next meeting, we will be going back into the rodent control and rodenticide discussion.
Mhm,
So we're anticipating there's going to be a lot of people here,
mhm.
again, and I will be sending out, to all the board members, a copy of the regulation. I don't think it's called a regulation, I think it's called a policy, that Newbury, Massachusetts put forth. But again, it is only for town-owned
Have you
properties.
looked at that? Because I think I sent the ones, I know there was one from Arlington that I sent to everybody a while back. Did you see that one?
Must have.
Yeah, it was one where, but you know. that
I just did a search for Massachusetts town.
I was able to talk to the health directors in Arlington and Lexington. I thought, you know, they had some interesting perspectives on it.
You know, what they did with the one in Newbury was they banned it on town-owned properties, but they had a procedure to follow for emergency use,
That's what I.
which
that's what I
had to come,
said.
had to come either to the department or to the Board
Yeah.
of Health for approval.
Yeah, that, I had said that's what Arlington does, and I was able to talk with the director there, and it was important for her that it went to the director, because if it's an emergency, you don't have time
Yeah.
to get the board involved. So I definitely think that that's something to consider with, you know, if the belief, understanding, you know, use versus use, you know, I feel like in understanding that the health department would be able to make that kind of a decision in an emergency.
Yeah, and so the other thing that came up was, I believe, one other town tried to require the pesticide companies to get prior approval for use on town-owned property, even on private properties. They were shut down by the courts.
Interesting.
Can't do
When,
that.
yeah, in Lexington, they had, when I spoke with the director there, she said that it's not a real rule in Lexington, but they just don't do it. Like, they don't use rodenticides in Lexington because like on town property, they don't. So it's not like they had to go through it. They just said, you know what, we're not gonna do it. Like
So
that, yeah.
the end result for the next Board of Health meeting is that we will probably have to come up with a policy or regulation or something to deal with this issue, because there's a lot of people that are very anxious to have something done.
Do you think at the next meeting, because I have a dentist appointment and I don't know, like I can reschedule it if I have to, because I do want to be part of the decision. But do you think there'll be a decision made at the next meeting, or do you think that there'll just be discussion in hearing people talk?
I think what generally I expect will happen is that there will be suggestions made about
Yeah.
what should be included,
Okay,
either in a policy or in a regulation.
Yep.
And that there wouldn't be able to be any vote except to
Okay.
pursue hearing that particular
Okay.
policy or recommendation.
Yep.
As a recommendation to be considered at another upcoming meeting.
okay, because I can listen to, just from my own perspective, because I do want to be involved as much as I can. And I have this dental issue that just can't seem to be fixed. This is like my 5th time at the dentist. So I would rather not reschedule, but if if it's just the discussion parts, I would be able to re-listen, like, be able to watch it and then be able to participate.
Don't reschedule, because my experience is if you reschedule a dentist appointment, it's months
Oh, well,
until you get back in again.
Yeah, I won't go into details, but I keep going and it's not getting, it's just giving the dentist a headache, so I'm waiting to go. So that, the soonest one I could get was that day, and I was like, all right, well, I'll see how the meeting goes, like, if I have to be at the meeting, I'll just reschedule. But if it's just a discussion and I can listen later, you know, we'll see how the dentist goes but I'll be able to listen in when I'm not in the chair.
That sounds really bad. I'm sorry.
Okay, good. So that makes me happy because I have been able to reach out to the different towns and ask them what they've been able to do.
Okay, because we'll need that discussion to be held, also, if you know of
Yes.
other towns.
Yep,
So just send us the information about the other towns.
yeah, I did. I had a
Okay.
couple of months
I
ago.
don't know if you found others since then.
Yeah, I haven't, I didn't hear back from anybody, so.
Okay, the other thing I want to mention is there has been something happening about flavored vapes and tobacco products in general. Massachusetts and California apparently are the only states that have a ban on the sale of flavored tobacco products, including vape cartridges.
That it's actually just a menthol, because the flavored is every, like, I know Rhode Island bans flavored, but the menthol
Yeah.
is menthol and wintergreen, that's the Massachusetts, California.
So according to the Office of Local and Regional Health, which had a webinar that you might have
I did, yep.
watched it too. The tobacco and vape companies have come up with something which is a menthol chemical derivative. And they claim it's not really menthol, although it apparently has either the taste or smell of menthol. And so MAHB has been doing battle with these companies for quite some time about this, and there's probably court action involved. In the meantime, the US Supreme Court has actually stated that some of the decision makings by the FDA can now be reviewed and overturned by the Congress, which troubles an awful lot of people. Because obviously the FDA has some very highly educated experts in the field of where they're working. And it probably is something which is not widely shared among members of Congress. And it may involve more than just the FDA. So it's a little trouble. But that's what's happening at the moment. Beyond that, I don't have anything else. Under new and old business, I put down Board of Health meeting schedule discussion because
Yes.
I remembered. And we said, we're not gonna talk about this till we have, you know,
Yeah.
the reorganization of the Board of Health, because we're gonna have a new member. Hello.
If I could just interrupt 1 second, Karen had another question,
okay.
and I just want, before we move on.
Okay, sorry, Karen, I didn't know. It's fine.
Plymouth North is considered our sort of location in case of an emergency. But we wouldn't go to Plymouth North for a cooling center unless a heat emergency was declared. Does that answer your question? Karen?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I heard somewhere that, the select board or somebody was deciding to put, Hedges School, Hawthorne, Nathaniel Hawthorne School and Cold Spring Schools, making, cooling stations. And so I was wondering about that.
I don't know
Whether-
anything about that.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been more
No.
there.
I thought the old schools did not have Sunday air conditioning.
I don't know.
It does not.
No.
So it wouldn't work very well.
Yeah.
What you can count on, I think, Karen, is if the emergency is declared, there will be,
Yeah.
I believe, a reverse 9/11
Yes.
notification sent out to everybody.
Mhm.
And it would contain information about where you can go to access, you know, a cooling center, especially if you have an awakening.
And it would be a banner on our website. It would be
Thank you.
like the banner that we're utilizing now on the website too, so.
And you guys have an alert system too that you can sign up for, right? Yeah, so that might be something to think about.
So Board of Health meetings, we currently meet from 4 to 6 PM on the second and fourth Wednesdays of every month.
Mhm.
Unless something happens which precludes our doing that. There was a suggestion made some time ago, that perhaps we should either change the time or actually go back to once a month instead of bi-weekly.
Mhm.
And I said, well, once we have a reorganization, we can discuss that. Keep in mind that we are kind of restricted in terms of times and days we can meet, because there are so many other groups that meet. And as you found out, we got chased out of here at our last meeting.
Yeah.
And they wanted in here, even though we officially didn't finish until 6:15 or 6.
Yeah.
So they're all sitting out in the hallway making us nervous. But you know, that there's restrictions.
Are they every 6 o'clock after us, the group is, so
That group-
we're always 4 to 6 and they're.
I was
always just
told,
like
I
something
believe
once a
that that
month.
was temporary. They're gonna go back to 7 o'clock starting times in another 2 or 3 meetings,
Mhm.
if I remember correctly. But it, you know, it's a little awkward.
No, I agree, I mean, it's hard, it is hard for me to get here at 4 o'clock twice a month. You know, it's just the commute and the
Yeah.
time and the work schedule. And if we can do it once a month, that would be ideal. I mean, I understand that things pop up and people have to wait, you know, if we're doing variances. But when, you know, we did have the stable variance, but if we don't have anything, I would request that we don't meet. I understand there's a lot of information that we can talk about. But if it's not pressing Board of Health business, it really, it's difficult to get here.
Yeah, as you saw, after we canceled the meeting, was it when you couldn't come?
Yeah,
and I
July.
couldn't, sometime. in
Yeah.
May,
The
In
first
June,
June.
yeah.
The first week
Oh,
meeting in June.
No,
It was the first, it was the
The
first
first
meeting, it
meeting
was
in
supposed to
June.
be in June.
We canceled it because, you know, there was no one available from the department, and I was gonna have an issue with it too.
yeah. I
So
mean,
we
I just-
canceled. What happens then, as you saw on our last agenda, is we had what?
Right. But it,
4, 6
right,
very
but from my perspective, that's easier for me. Like, I understand and if the group's meeting at 7 and we do a 3-hour meeting once a month, that's much easier for my work schedule. And I know I'm only speaking of my own work schedule, but it's like, it's a 4 o'clock meeting. I have to leave work at 3, you know, and it's twice a month to have to leave work early to get here. Because, you know, and sometimes I do have to take it from work, but that's not ideal either. So if there's nothing pressing, I 100% understand pressing Board of Health business where businesses are waiting for us to make decisions. But if there's nothing, or if there's a way to have the meetings, or the meetings start, which I know we just discussed as hard timing, and I know with scheduling and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if there's other rooms available that are available later.
No.
No.
But to Amy's point, the select board is only gonna meet once a month during the, during the
Yeah.
summer. I mean, they're limiting their schedule too.
Businesses.
Exactly,
I have no
right.
issues, if somebody's waiting for, if somebody has an emergency septic plan that has to get approved right
Well,
away.
I can approve an emergency anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if there
Exactly.
was something was bubbling out of the ground, you
Right.
wouldn't have to wait.
Right,
Yeah,
yes,
it wouldn't have to wait anyway.
yes.
And I think that, we have really great rapport with our folks who do the septic systems, and I think if I would just told them that,
We're going once a month.
we're trying it out at
Trying
once a
it
month to see how it goes, so
Yep.
just be prepared that, moving forward, this is the date, that
Yep.
we're gonna be meeting, so plan accordingly. I don't foresee that being an issue.
Oh, that's,
I
and,
don't.
and Barry, I think the information that you present us is very interesting. And maybe if we don't have time, like you're looking at the agenda, just email it to us, like you have it all right now, I would love to read that stuff. So that we could, if time is an issue,
Yeah.
it's not that I don't wanna be informed, but.
No, I agree, and
Yeah.
there's times like, I don't say everything's in my director's report, but it's posted.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? People who are interested can go and take a look
Yeah.
at it.
And it's interesting information.
And I don't think it's going to be out of the ordinary, because I think other towns also only
Yes.
meet once a
Yes.
month, so I don't think it's going to be something
They're two
that.
hours, yes,
Yeah,
they're
we're
2
not, we're not
hours.
breaking a barrier here.
I
Do you
agree.
know what I mean? This
Yep.
is something that's
And
common
if it
occurrence.
doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Exactly.
But it would be
Exactly.
really helpful for me if we could try to do it once.
And another question I guess comes up. Is there a seasonal sort of flux in the variance requests?
We used to see that, we don't anymore. Yeah, we used to see a downturn in the winter,
You know, I think
but,
there's not.
Oh, yeah.
there isn't the,
Yeah.
no, as long as you can break through that ground.
Yeah.
But unless we had a really amazing,
Yeah.
freeze and the
It's,
ground,
I see things slow down in the summer
yeah.
because people are just away on vacation. Spring and fall are definitely the busiest,
Mhm.
but. Summer.
So for we can't change the next one because we have a massive amount of stuff to get through.
Okay, I mean, the next one, like I said, I won't be able to be here because of the dentist
Yeah.
appointment, but I'll call in when I can and I'll listen to the message.
Sure.
I'll listen to it after.
How hard is it to make a last minute decision about, well, there's not much to do, so we're just gonna cancel it?
Not at all. In fact, you could even post it in gender and still cancel it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just the same thing. I mean, if we would I don't think we'd ever be that close, that we would have to cancel something that's already posted. Because you have 48 hours. So I think we would
Yeah.
certainly know ahead of time.
You know what businesses around, like you would be able to say,
Mhm.
I think, like, I would rather wait and post if we need to, rather than cancel. You know,
Like even like, okay, because let's like take a look at, even the grease trap variances, you're not gonna have any anymore.
Mm.
Because,
Oh,
like, you're not gonna,
this is it.
because it's it.
Yeah.
Either you have it or you're gonna get fined, and then you might have someone begging for forgiveness, but for the most part, it can wait, exactly, and be fined. Like I said, we have a great rapport with all of our septic
Right.
installs, and the other towns they work in, they used to have it being,
Yeah.
they're kind of spoiled by
Yeah.
Plymouth, to be honest with you, and how quickly we do get things done, so I don't think anyone would be,
Yeah. It's,
upset or,
I
and
think
really.
it's
It
unreasonable.
would, yeah, be a great disturbance to their business, so to speak, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Dana just had a great point. We may be able to take, and I will take a look at this, I wonder if the opposite weeks, like we know we're being followed on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the
Yeah,
month.
yeah.
But maybe the third Wednesday of the month, no one's following us.
That would be great.
So maybe we could do like a 5 to 7.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
That
And
would
you
be
could, and you wouldn't, right, you wouldn't have to, I don't know, I shouldn't speak for
Yeah,
everybody,
I know.
but it's something to consider, but I'll need to find that out first. I don't know off the top of my head if someone is using the space or any space on the third Wednesday, but that's a
Well, the
possibility.
first Wednesday.
Well, yeah, the opposite of the 2 and 4, that we know someone's following us, you know what I mean? And today someone was even here before us.
Yeah.
So that we were sandwiched, so maybe,
That would be really great.
yeah, we'll look into that. for
The
sure.
only other thing that we usually have a lot to do is when tobacco inspection results come in.
Oh, yeah, we do. Yeah,
And we know that that's twice a year.
yeah, yeah, so that, yeah, absolutely.
Or we
Yeah.
expect it to be long.
Or if you ever were considering putting something on the town meeting warrant, that would
Yeah.
probably, you would have to be required to
Yeah.
have a
Yeah,
few
and I'm
more.
okay with, that, like,
Yeah.
but it would be really helpful to me if we could do it once a month.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking about how much we have evolved. And I was actually talking to David Golden, our past
Mhm.
member, about this, and I said, it wasn't too long ago where we met in the morning, and it was
I know.
15 minutes long.
15?
It was like 15, if it was a half an hour, we were like, what is going on? Hello. Do you know what I mean? But it's changed so much and public health has evolved so much. So, but I do think that I don't think we would miss anything.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because I think we are flexible enough that if we had to, like you said, if tobacco violations come in, we know we have to have all hands on deck for that. And, let's hope it doesn't happen that way again.
Right, I know. It was
I'd be willing to
everywhere.
bet you, based on other towns and our
Let's,
I know,
granted.
let's hope.
In Minsk, it was 4 out of 23 permits, and I've never, like, in the 8 years I've been there, I've seen like 2 violations. And we had 4 and one
Hmm.
check, at the same time, we had, was it 18 here or something?
Yeah,
You should have heard the discussion at our last grant group meeting. People, that even though they've been fined before, it's often repeat offenders.
Oh, yeah.
And one apparently, manager of a business just refused to pay. It said, I'm gonna do it, if I don't think the person that came in the inspection was actually under 19 years of age.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
true,
but I think that's if you don't mind looking to see if we can.
no, of
do
course I
that.
will, yeah.
yeah, so we should why don't we take a quick poll?
Okay.
Are you free on the first or third Wednesdays
I'll have
of the
to.
month also?
Do you have
I
like a
actually,
certain-
I wanted to join the board years ago, but I didn't because
It was more.
that was challenging and I have young kids.
Mhm.
Now they're both in public schools, so like, that's why I was like, okay, now's my time.
Yeah,
But I'll do anything. I'm new here.
You'll
but I
do
wanna,
anything.
like, make
You
it
should
fit.
never say that.
But are
Because I will remember you said.
I think it should be fine. I can't. Wednesdays are pretty good for me. Nothing's jumping out as
Mhm.
far as.
What about you, Deb?
I have a work obligation every other month on Wednesday, but it's a 6 PM meeting. And so I guess if you were gonna, what was the proposed time you were thinking?
Well, we're thinking about possibly, two things. Possibly going to Thursday.
yeah.
We-
I mean, I guess, the second Thursday of the month.
Because Thursday it's apparently not. It's free later. From 5 to 7.
Well, no, I was thinking if we did the opposite,
Yeah, the first and
the
third.
first or third Wednesday.
Only that is free.
Yeah, because now we're sandwiched. People are using this room before us and people are using this room after us on the second and fourth. So maybe I'm gonna look into seeing if the first and third, we have more flexibility for how long we stay.
Mhm.
And then are we gonna run into issue if we're not meeting more than once a month, if we suddenly have to?
No, because what would happen, we would know in the department that a number, plans have come in or variance requests have come in or bug collecting around and we got more bad news or whatever the issue is. And then I would reach out to you, Dr. Coffin, as the chair and say, we gotta talk about doing it twice this month. The workload is just, it's there and, it needs to be reviewed.
Cause I don't mind, Dana, you usually know about variances certainly by Thursday
Oh,
before the meeting,
Yeah.
right? Or Friday at the latest.
Oh, yeah.
So if we suddenly see, gee, there's no variance request.
I mean, and we've been so flexible here. I mean,
Yeah.
there are other towns that you have to get your request in by a certain day, or you're not even considered for the next meeting.
Right.
You're not even
And it's
considered.
like,
Like, don't,
month and a half.
yeah, don't even talk to
Yeah.
us. I mean, we're very flexible. I mean, we're like letting people come in.
In those,
Yeah.
yeah, and those variances, like to Karen's point, she can approve them if necessary, if it's an emergency.
Yeah.
And I do think that the installers and the engineers are ready to wait, like they can wait.
Mhm.
Deb, I'm sorry, Deb, did you, is it every Wednesday at 6 o'clock?
The third Wednesday
Okay. So
of
the third Wednesday, all right, so that's.
Okay,
So maybe like.
every
first-
other month, though, every other month, so.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, what about you, Dr. Reed?
But I'm the alternate, so I mean, if you have a full board, you don't need
Well, we
me.
don't always have a full
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
It happens.
And we'd like to have you anyway.
Even if you're not voting, we still get good information by the questions.
We want the
So-
whole team.
So we can look into that, but we need more information, I think.
Mhm.
But in the interim, soon, we're definitely going to meet 2 weeks from today and go over the rodenticide stuff.
Yep, and then I'll look into,
And starting in, I
First
guess,
one.
starting in August,
mhm.
we will see what we can do in terms of changing time, changing the Wednesday we meet,
Mhm.
if we can. And it's pretty easy for me to just say, okay, Dana, do we have anything that we have to do at this meeting? And, no, not really, it's optional. Okay, then it's optional that we meet, we don't meet.
Yeah,
Okay,
but we'll do once, in August, we'll try once a month. Is that what we'll?
We're
Yeah.
gonna try it.
Yeah.
yeah, so we'll meet on the 24th to do rodenticide,
Yep.
well, other things, but
Yeah.
that's a major player. And then I'm gonna look into the first Wednesday of the month. If there's availability with a little flexibility, so we might be able to go a little longer.
Okay, thank you very much.
Or start later, so that, and go
Yeah.
later.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Make it a little easier for you.
okay.
Dr. Reed and I are different, I mean, I'm a different case, because I'm fully retired,
And we're here at your disposal.
Yeah.
We serve the board.
Originally, we felt, that we don't wanna make the department staff stay too late after they've been working all day.
Yeah. We'll get a staff.
I do recall long ago that the Board of Health used to meet mornings once a month and then evenings the other
Mhm.
time during the month. But obviously mornings can cause all kinds of troubles
Yeah.
with people who are working.
It's interesting when you think about it, just because you're limiting your volunteer pool, like, we're depending on the times, like, the Board of Health in Smithfield, we meet at 7 at night. You know, and that's, so that people, and the whole board, nobody's retired, you know, everybody's working.
We actually did the morning one, this is when I was literally the
Yeah.
part-time clerk. But we did the morning one because the businesses asked for that.
Isn't that interesting?
Mhm.
Oh, like the engineers and
Yep.
stuff? Oh.
They wanted, because they didn't wanna come later, they wanted to during their work day. You know, so that's why we did it that way. So we scheduled accordingly. If you needed to come during the day, you will put on this agenda, and if you needed,
Yeah.
if you were more flexible or.
Yeah.
You know, then we put you on a different agenda, but that's really what was.
Well, the 4 o'clock start time kind of helped that a little bit, I assume,
Yeah,
because it's still
Yeah.
work day.
yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yep. That's what I'm saying. We've always been so flexible with our partners that I think moving forward will continue to be, and
Yeah.
they'll be receptive.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
We had a thorough discussion, we know what to do.
Yes, we have our homework.
Okay,
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
unless you have other business. to
I
bring-
don't know what it is.
Does anyone else have new business to bring up? No, then Amy, I will ask you if you'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Dr. Reed seconds the motion. Is there further discussion? Of course not. I have to call the roll because we have one person that's zooming in. Meg, yes or no to adjourn?
Yeah.
Deb?
Yes.
Amy?
Yeah.
Myself?
Yeah.
Okay, myself, yes. It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
We are officially adjourned.